senators, beginning with Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, 19 million. Then Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, 18 million. In fifth, California Senator Kamala Harris, 11.8 million.
We're losing 129 people a day in this country. In the city of Manchester, we're losing one person a week. We're losing 129 people a day in this country. In the city of Manchester, we're losing one person a week.
Unbelievable.
Minimally. And my question to you is, what would you do in order to secure recovery services for those that have slipped through the cracks of prevention and moved on to treatment?
Thank you very much for your question. It is a crisis here in New Hampshire, and by the way, it is a crisis in Vermont. You may recall our governor gave his State of the Union speech a year ago on this issue, because people think, well, New Hampshire and Vermont, these are rural states, not a problem. You are right, it is a terrible problem. What do we do? For a start, we understand that substance abuse and addiction is a health issue, not a criminal issue. Okay? And when I talk about moving toward universal health care, what I understand that to be, and it is absolutely imperative that it be, is understanding that mental health and addiction is part of health care. And what that means is that when people need treatment, they shouldn't have to wait 3 months. When they need it, they should be able to get it. Approaches. But the bottom line is we have a very, very serious crisis in this country, and we have got to make sure that when people need the help, they get the help. And the other question that we have to ask is, and it's a tough question, nobody I know knows the answer, why is it? Why is it? One of the reasons, by the way, is I think that doctors are prescribing opiates in a way that they have got to cut back a little bit on. They're giving out a whole lot of pills. A friend of mine got a molar removed. They got 50 very strong pain-killing drugs. And these drugs are rampant. Kids are using them, getting addicted, then getting into heroin. So I think we've got to talk to the pharmaceutical industry about what they're producing, doctors what they're prescribing, and then we have to make treatment available to people when they need it.
To legalize recreational marijuana on the 2016 ballot. Senator Sanders, right here in Nevada, there will be a measure to legalize recreational marijuana on the 2016 ballot. You said you smoked marijuana twice, didn't quite work for you. If you were a Nevada resident, how would you vote?
I suspect I would vote yes. And I would vote yes because I am seeing in this country too many lives being destroyed for nonviolent offenses. We have a criminal justice system that lets CEOs on Wall Street walk away, and yet we are imprisoning or giving jail sentences to young people who are smoking marijuana. I think we have to think through this war on drugs, which has done an enormous amount of damage. We need to rethink our criminal justice system, and we've got a lot of work to do in that area.
Today's $572 million judgment against Johnson & Johnson is the first major legal decision against a drug maker for its role in the opioid crisis. As William Brangham reports, the Oklahoma trial has been closely watched by thousands of litigants in other states and jurisdictions.
Oklahoma Attorney General Mike Hunter heralded the judge's ruling this afternoon.
Today, Judge Bachman has affirmed our position that Johnson & Johnson, motivated by greed and avarice, is responsible for the opioid epidemic in our state. Johnson & Johnson will finally be held accountable for thousands of deaths and addiction caused by their activities. So there's no question in my mind that these companies knew what was going on at the highest level. They just couldn't make money from it, and that's why they're responsible.
That they're going to do. What is Oklahoma going to do with this $500-something million?
There was an abatement plan that was put forward during the trial. The state initially asked, by the way, for $17.5 billion to fund their 30-year plan. So they got a fraction of what they really asked for. At the press conference earlier today, Terry White, who's the commissioner for mental health and substance abuse in Oklahoma, said that they would be able to really start, funding projects and treatment. It's really an open question of how that's going to work. There was also a law that was passed after the Purdue settlement in Oklahoma. So the legislature may be able to allocate these funds. So whether or not they get allocated towards opioid treatment or prevention is just really a big question mark right now.
Crowded race for the Democratic presidential nomination has started to winnow, and this week we'll learn which of the remaining.
For one of the opioid manufacturers that we've seen thus far, everything else has been settlements. The judge today was that we've seen really the first loss for one of the opioid manufacturers that we've seen thus far. Everything else has been settlements. The judge today was particularly tough on the company in his ruling, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was very, Judge Balkin, detailed in the judgment that the $572 million that he ordered the company to pay immediately was to remediate the public nuisance. He even brought up things that were, parts that were talked about during the trial, saying that there was, a fetal problem with children in the state who are born with opioids in their system. So, the judge really highlighted a lot of the main arguments that the state made during the case.
The state said that Johnson & Johnson basically hid the fact they knew that these drugs were highly addictive. What else did the state allege Johnson & Johnson did wrong here?
Yeah, well, the big thing that the Attorney General, Mike Hunter, alleged was that, and he said it multiple times, including today at the press conference, that Johnson & Johnson was the kingpin of the opioid crisis. And when he says that, he's referring to their former ownership of two companies out of Tasmania and Australia that grew and developed a highly potent opioid poppy. And those companies then sold that base ingredient, that raw narcotic, to other opioid manufacturers like Purdue Pharma, which produced OxyContin with it. So during the course of the trial, the state argued, a rising tide lifts all boats. Johnson & Johnson knew that even if it wasn't their opioids that were being sold, their, deceptive marketing campaigns resulted in more sales of opioids and more sales for their bottom line. Something to remember, Johnson & Johnson sold those two companies in 2016.
You mentioned initially that the state had used a somewhat novel legal strategy to go after the company. They used what's called a public nuisance law. Can you explain what that legal strategy argued?
Yeah, public nuisance is a very broad law in Oklahoma. It really refers to any public nuisance in regards even to health outcomes. Before this, it has been successfully litigated in regard to lead paint, things along those lines. It usually has to do with property, which is why today's decision is very interesting. West Virginia, for example, filed a very similar lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson, citing public nuisance law last week. So now that we've seen, at least in one court case, that it works, we may see more attorneys general decide to take up this public nuisance claim and see if they can get money for their own state.
What's the likely impact on that much larger pool of cases?
Well, public nuisance is one of the claims that's being made in the consolidated Ohio case. It really just gives more leverage, really, to the side of the communities who are suing, whether that be, tribes or other municipalities. They might be able to bring other drug companies or distributors to the table and say, hey, it worked here. Maybe you're willing to settle with us now rather than, going for a trial. Because, as of right now, Johnson & Johnson now has to pay over $500 million. And we saw before, I mean, Purdue Pharma settled with the state for $270 million. Teva, which makes generic opioids, settled for $85 million. They were initially both parties to this litigation, but they settled before it began. So, you know, Johnson & Johnson could be on the hook for this full $570 some odd million. And, you know, other companies are going to look at that and say, hey, maybe it's worth it to just settle.
Absent an appeal, which I believe Johnson & Johnson has said that they're going to do, what is Oklahoma going to do with this $500-something million?
They must including the amount of THC and the amount of CBD. The marijuana sold in the dispensaries is to be taxed in accordance with existing statute. This is one of the things the study committee found this summer, that the Department of Revenue has a taxing system in place. Health insurance companies are not required to cover the marijuana. An employer is not required to accommodate the use of marijuana at his place of employment. There is an annual report that shall be made to the General Assembly on the effectiveness of this program. The report will be made by DHEC. The bill also repeals the Controlled Substance Therapeutic Research Program. This has been on the books since 1980 and has never been used.
Thank you, Martha. We have two of the authors of the bill, and so I asked them for their comments. Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few comments, and picking up to begin with on something that Martha said near the end, which is in regard to the provisions of the bill that provide for seed-to-sale chain of custody. We recognize that there are concerns among some that cannabis grown for medicinal purposes might somehow be diverted for recreational use. And what we found, Mr. Chairman, is that looking at best practices in other states, that there is a way of coding the plant so that you can track it throughout the system. And so a lot of effort was put into making sure that there wasn't diversion of something that is grown for medicinal purposes or recreational purposes. And I suspect one of the things that we'll focus on, and I'm counting on SLED to help us out here, is making sure that we've got the very best tracking procedures in place possible to provide that assurance. The second thing I will note is that this bill is, in my opinion, a logical extension of what the General Assembly did last session when it determined that it would be legal in South Carolina for doctors in consultation with their patients to authorize the use of a cannabis-related substance for epilepsy. CBD oil is the name of that substance. The reason for that is that there has been empirical evidence of palliative effect that CBD oil has on individuals with epilepsy. The person, or the little girl that inspired me to file this bill last year, Mary Louise Swing, was suffering up to 100 seizures an hour, and conventional pharmaceuticals were providing little to no relief. There has been tremendous progress made as a result of this CBD oil. So this is an example of where we can see lives that have been touched. The other thing that I want to point out is that South Carolina is not alone in regard to discussing this matter. Other states are discussing it, and in terms of where we fall on the spectrum, Mr. Chairman, we're on the very conservative end. You've got one end where you have states like Colorado and Washington, which has simply said we're going to legalize it for recreational, medicinal uses, and we're not going to provide the sort of restrictions that you might in regard to a controlled substance. We're on the other end of that spectrum here, and this is the approach I've chosen to take, knowing that South Carolina is a relatively socially conservative state, and that the cannabis is only going to be for medicinal purposes. It's going to be treated as a controlled substance. It's going to be authorized only in instances where physicians authorize it for patient use. There's got to be that consultation, and only in the context where there is a very strict seed-to-sale chain of custody tracking. So I realize we may get some criticism by some throughout this process for it not being a more liberal or more lenient policy, and that may be a debate for another day. But I wanted this panel to know that what Senator Huddard and I have come up with here is something that is very conservative and controlled and modest in regard to what's being discussed in other states. The other thing I will note is that last session in Washington, D.C., Congress passed a continuing resolution which contained a proviso, and it directed DOJ, or actually prohibited DOJ from enforcing the Schedule I cannabis prohibitions against any state that has legalized the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes. So for those concerns that may be expressed about our law being in contravention of federal law, I think it's important to note that that continuing resolution contains that particular directive to the DOJ. As Martha indicated, part of the bill that was passed last year provided for a study committee to look into other conditions for which cannabis could be authorized for use by physicians to patients, again, for that narrow charge. And over the summer and the fall, we went to, I think, Charleston, Columbia, Greenville, and Florence, and held numerous hearings and heard testimony, some of which you'll hear today, of how cannabis-related substances can provide relief where conventional pharmaceuticals fail. And really that's the touchstone of what we're talking about here. We're talking about instances where conventional medications have not provided the degree of relief that a physician believes that a patient can experience with a cannabis-related process, or substance, excuse me. So with that by way of background, I'll yield to my co-sponsor, Senator Hutto, but I did want to hit those threshold issues. One, extension of what we did last year. Two, very conservative in terms of what other states are doing. Three, in accordance with what the continuing resolution passed by Congress has authorized the states to authorize it for medicinal use. And finally, everything is tied to the physician-patient relationship, and unless there is a physician making a diagnosis and authorizing its use, it cannot happen. So I think that's important as well. We're really, emphasizing that particular doctor-patient relationship. So with that,
state, and I think what we've heard in general is that there are some illnesses or conditions that marijuana brings relief to those patients like nothing else has been able to do, and the doctors that would be in control of this Colorado model and nation to do, and the doctors that would be in control of this will make that determination. I know there's some out there who want us to go all the way to like a Colorado model, and I want to stress that's not what this is.
And one of the people that testified was a vet, and he tries to commit suicide, I think, 3 or 4 times a week. He's on multiple medications, and he says, he doesn't necessarily need that if he was able to do this medical marijuana. And he can't do that because the lady he's engaged with has a young child, and I think it struck us all when we heard that testimony. Now, this is a Senate bill, so it cannot make crossover. So at this point in time, I will tell you that even if we were to report it to full committee and report it to the floor, it is not going to go anywhere between now and the 1st of January. So it would be hopefully my intent, but I will yield to the staff. But we've got 2 authors here, and I'm inclined to move it to the full committee. I just may not do that and ask just to carry it over.
Medical marijuana, and I think this is something that we really need to look into. If it can provide relief to these individuals, it's something that we should need to get called, because I thank Senator Petto and Senator Davis for taking the lead on this, because there are many individuals in our state. I received several phone calls from parents with kids with epilepsy and the relief they've been getting from medical marijuana, and I think this is something that we really need to look into. If it can provide relief to these individuals, it's something that we should move forward with, and I just want to thank them for taking the lead on this.
Yes, you too. I would tell you that we have 24 people. We're not going to get to all the speakers today. I'm going to try to pick a few that have really expressed a desire, or their state senator has called me and asked them if they could speak. We sometimes have them for, sometimes against. We ask for respect. Even if they don't share the views you share, we would expect respect for their views.
Do you realize that I just understood the whole dinner conversation without asking you? And that was a big thing for us. And she actually, the next, she started cleaning her room. She started this evening, immediately to the first part. When we started doing the oil, that immediately cleared up. And we were sitting at the dinner table that first evening, and we had we had dinner and it was done, and my husband looked at me, he said, do you realize that I just understood the whole dinner conversation without asking you? And that was a big thing for us. And she's actually, she started cleaning her room, she started moving, and she went to Dollywood for 3 days with her grandparents. That does not happen. That's the first babysitter I've had in 10 years. And that was great, I got to tell you. And it was great for both of us. And everybody's, it's scary. It's scary to have someone with seizures, and the way she falls and hits. Just last November, we had to have 8 stitches put in her head 8 different times. And each time at least 12.
Thank you for being here, Dixie. Thank you for being here too.
So much of it is really self-medicating. Unhappy with what is happening there at the marijuana situation. As I've talked with people, everyone has had an experience or they know someone who has benefited. And I know a lot of people say the word recreational, but so much of it is really self-medicating. If you've had a hard day and you have a glass of wine to wind down, make no mistake, that's a drug, and you're self-medicating. So many people in this state are self-medicating because it has helped them. In Colorado, you cannot go into the grocery store and buy alcohol. You have to go to a state licensed store, just like you have to go into a state licensed dispensary.
Tina,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you very much for your testimony. We have Chris Ellis from Arizona. I guess he's traveled a little bit far, so he has.
I'll defer to future meetings, but that would be great.
Okay. It's 10:20. Would you like to, in the front row, would you have anything We got about 4 minutes left, and I didn't want to cut you out.
I can do the super quick thing.
Okay.
Let's talk about some numbers right quick. South Carolina is 51st in education.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is John McDaniel. I'm from Charleston. I've traveled roughly 20 hours to speak to my elected representatives for this now makes 28 minutes after my 2 minutes. Okay, so let's talk about numbers. Y'all each essentially represent 100,000 constituents. 1 in 25 people will develop epilepsy at some time in their life. Quick math says that you, and Mr. Otto is gone, each represent 4,000 epileptics at some point in their life. Right now, you represent 4,000 people that can benefit from passing a medical marijuana bill. That's not talking about the 30,000 people that you each represent that suffer from chronic pain. I was run over by a 10,000-pound forklift. My foot feels like it's in boiling water. If I had more time, I could tell you all about the pain from hell. It's called dysthesias. It is it's a neural disease. It gets worse over time based on traumatic experiences. There's something called a presynaptic neuronal excitability inhibitor. It's called THC. What it does is it turns the volume down on my pain. So it's very important to pass a medical marijuana bill as soon as possible. The only problems that I see with it, I see a bunch of problems, I'm sorry. I see a bunch of problems with it. The main problem is from a philosophical standpoint, the easiest way to supply the greatest number of people is to remove barriers from supplying them. Whenever you have one distributor per county, instead of one distributor per, say, 100,000 people, or say as many distributors as the market can support, then you are denying accessibility to medicine that can improve people's lives on a daily basis.
If I could just real quickly, and John, I agree with what you just said. My goal is to get a bill passed to go ahead so we can go ahead and start cultivating, start dispensing, and knowing South Carolina and knowing the concerns of law enforcement and knowing the concerns of many in regard to diversion or recreational use, I have consciously gone about developing a very conservative, very transparent, very methodical bill because I think that has the best chances of passing. Very methodical bill because I think that has the best chances of passing. I don't disagree with you at all in regard to a lot of the points that you made, but I want to let you know that my objective is to go ahead and address all the concerns so we can get something passed. And so anyway, I'll just say that.
Thank you.
As far as Chief Kill, I'll be back to do more after Chief Kill testifies. Also, the Blunt Truth conference that they held was an absolute farce. One of their facts, the very first fact they put up on their fact or fiction thing was that cannabis in all forms is illegal in the state of South Carolina, and Mr. Davis knows for a fact that that is not true. So, thank you.
Thank you. Now, if you don't understand the rules of the Senate, this is a Senate bill. Why, did you want to testify? No, you came from Burles Inlet. He's a patient of mine, dental patient. Anyway, and his dad's my dad's my CPA, so we're good friends. Anyway, at this point in time, what I would say to you is this. The way the Senate works is for bills to be taken up in the House, they have to be in the House by May 1st. Of course, May 1st is gone and passed. So any bill we were to pass today would have to go to full committee, and then it would have to go to the floor. We know we can't achieve that with only 8 days left. So our intent would be, and I think Senator Davis' intent would be, to review this bill probably before session starts. Give it a good hearing with Chief Kill, try to answer all the questions so that maybe in the first few days of session next year, we've got time to get it to the full, got time to get it to the floor, got time to get it to the House, where it can just fly through there. So.
This is the first year in a 2-year session. Based on the information that I've heard, and the input I've received, and the technology that's out there, there will be a bill passed. There will be a bill signed by Governor Haley. We are going to address all the concerns that SLED has. We're going to address the concerns that physicians have. We're going to address the concerns pharmacists have. We're going to address the concerns growers have. And we're going to get this done because it's absolutely critical that we go ahead and make available to people who are suffering things that their doctors believe can be a benefit. And I don't think there's any reason, I have not heard any reason whatsoever compelling in any way to interfere with that physician-patient relationship. And so this is going to get done. It got done last year. You guys coming out and sharing those stories is going to drive this across the finish line, and we're going to come up with a bill that we can be proud of and that provides relief. So thank you all for coming, and to be continued.
Motion. Thank you all for coming.
I have got the chairman of Ways and Means, Brian White, and I have got my Public Safety Subcommittee Chair, Mike Pitts, who's a retired police officer. Those are the two people, that's where the budget starts, is in the House of Representatives. The chairman of Ways and Means, he's the one that writes the budget for the House. My Public Safety Subcommittee Chair is the person that all the state law enforcement agencies go for and ask him for what it is to do. They're coming out to SLED next Tuesday morning, 2 of them. And I'm going to sit down and go with them the things that we need. SLED's budget last year appropriated money. When I talk about this, there's 2 or 3 different pots of money. We get some federal dollars, okay, for different programs that we get that are federal dollars. We get what we call other funds. Other funds are those fees, fines, and fees that we get money from. And then we get what we call state appropriated dollars. Those are the dollars that are actually in our budget, okay? Last year, we got $23.6 million. When I left SLED in 2008, our budget was almost $37 million. So you see, we've lost $14 million. When I left in 2008, we had over 400 agents. Today, I got 240 agents. You know, why do they chronically underfund our agency? You know, I don't know. I tell you that, it's like I said earlier, I talk to them every day about public safety being a core function of government. If you got to cut everything, you got to cut everything else. You can't keep cutting law enforcement. I think this year, I think we got that through to them. I do believe that, and I will tell you that both the governor, the House, Chairman White, and Senator Leatherman, who is the Senate Finance Chairman, all 3 of those people have committed to me this year to help SLED, and I believe they will. You know, I think one of the reasons is because law enforcement does not have a big lobby. You know, we don't have a big group of people. I know Ms. Payne knows that with education, you start talking about cutting education, you can't get in that lobby at the State House. You can't get in. When you start talking about cutting law enforcement, you know, we are used to, I guess because of our rank and file structure, you know, we got bosses, the governor's my boss, and you know, we go down and we plead and we tell them what our needs are, but if we don't fund it, if they don't end up funding it, you know, you're not going to see that lobby crowded with law enforcement. And again, that's the only thing I can tell you. I think we'll have more success this year. And we had some.
Metro 1 clear. Hampton, Holly, 4 copy. Stop.
Today.
What were we doing?
I'm going to explain all that to you. I'm also met with the police department, okay? Here's my options. You execute that lane change in front of me without utilizing your turn signal. I'm also met with the police department, okay? Here's my options. You execute that lane change in front of me without utilizing your turn signal. You drifted over. You just changed lanes. No signal. You gotta use that turn signal 100 feet before actually executing that lane change, okay? I mean, like I said, the reason why I stopped you is you changed lanes unlawfully. There was no turn signal indicating that you were changing lanes. You have to use your turn signal 100 feet and actually doing so, okay? Yes, sir. Now, all I did was write you a warning for that, okay? So, what I'll do is I'm going to have you step out and you're going to go back here in front of this white car for me, okay? And get everything else there, okay? Go ahead and step out for me. Thank you.
Copy, 71 Metro 1 clear. Hampton, Holly, 4 copy. Jack, stop.
What's that?
That's true. It does have an automatic thing. It's not my car.
It's not my car, so when it beeps, then I notice that when I signal it doesn't beep, and
Usually it lets us know that's straight.
my dad just does.
Is that the thing in the...
Sir, if you don't mind, can you turn this lane step out for me? We're going to talk about some stuff. Go ahead. I mean, like I said, the reason why I stopped you is you changed lanes unlawfully. There was no turn signal indicating that you were changing lanes. You have to use your turn signal 100 feet and actually doing so, okay? Yes, sir. Now, all I did was write you a warning for that, okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you step out and you're going to hold back here in front of this white car for me, okay? And get everything else there, okay? Go ahead and step out for me. Thank you.
All of those charges are higher than the law for which the law provides, even when you calculate in the surcharges under 14.1206, which is 107% tax or interest on top of that if you decide to go to court. I'm sorry, but man, this is not legal. They locked up my girlfriend because she used her First Amendment right. They pulled me over because they say that I didn't signal. But if you look at the video, you can see I signaled in plenty of time. Anyhow, that's where we're at.
Okay. I did get all those.
Is there anything else you need from me or anything?
I don't think so.
I mean, we're really in fear of going back there because if the judge on her whim, you know, this has been anyhow. We're about to lose our homes because of this. They took her mortgage money and she was just about to refinance and make it so that her interest rate was lower. Now her payment's going to be late, so she will be unable to refinance. She was placed into jail and then brought before... I want you to listen to this for a minute because you're a victim's advocate, okay? Michelle?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Just really quickly, she was in shackles before the judge, disallowed to have her reading glasses. On the recording that they claim that they will give us, you will be able to hear her tell the judge she can't read the documents. She's a third grade teacher. She was unable to fill out the form correctly. She's a third grade teacher that corrects tests every day. But I sit up with her all night when she works on this stuff off the books, working on, you know, as a teacher, barely making ends meet, and she can seem to be able to fill out her students' tests, to correct her students' tests correctly, but because they disallowed her to have her reading glasses on the grounds that they were not prescription, the judge said, that's okay, I'll read them to you. Well, ma'am, she was in jail in shackles, under duress, forced to sign documents that she couldn't read. Then when we went into court, when we pointed out that the video that they promised us was not given to us, the Corporal Strauss claimed it was unavailable because Chief Alexander had it under lock and key and was not there. And I wrote fortunately, but I mistyped unfortunately. Chief Alexander bellowed out in court, yelled at my co-defendant, Elizabeth C. Wallace, and then later on her way out, because she was scared, she rushed out of the courtroom because she has PTS and her counselors have told her to just, you know, go to a safe space. So she went out of the courtroom, and on her way out, he stopped her. And she squinted at, because she didn't have her glasses on then either, she squinted at his badge, name badge, and she said, "Oh, Alexander, you're the chief, right?" And he said, "You know who I am. You did your homework." Well, ma'am, I do research online, and when I go to Case Text or Ross Intelligence or other artificial intelligence legal research software, that phrase, "you know who I am," is routinely used as evidence against threatening witnesses. There are people, 278 or something, results from just that search term, "you know who I am," and the word threat. I guess that's it.
Okay, well, I will review this stuff and then see who it needs to go to, but it sounds like you've cross-pled, and do you still have pending charges?
Well, they tell us that they wanted a continuance, and when I objected to the fact that they claimed that Strauss was the arresting officer, Strauss hung his head and attempted to evade the question. And the third time I pressed him on the question in open court, he stipulated that no, he was not the arresting officer. And I said, "So Captain Lodeholt was, right?" And he hesitated and said yes. So they wouldn't let us have a fair hearing. They wouldn't let us face our accusers. They wouldn't give us the Rule 5 evidence that the judge had agreed we could have. They are stymieing us from a fair trial. They're keeping from us other Rule 5 evidence from the other 3 police cars. And the person that pulled me over lied to 2 police officers, at least, that I know of. When we get the third, when we get Strauss's video, if we ever get Strauss's video, we'll know if he lied to a 3rd police officer. If I did that, that would be a felony, right? Or at least an arrestable offense? Anyhow, you don't know. But that's what happened, you know. We're going to lose our houses over a misdemeanor charge where the charges were more than triple what the law provides. So, are we victims?
So I'm going to have to look at this because right now you have pending charges, so my office shouldn't really be talking to you.
Yes, but you're the victim's advocate office for the 14th solicitor. And I just want to say this one more thing. Just want to say this one more thing so that I don't misstate the case. As I understand it, the definition of extrinsic fraud is officers of the court conspiring to deny a fair hearing or suppressing evidence or committing fraud before the court. Now, in conjunction with a lawyer. The 14th solicitor is the lawyer in this case, no? Or at least Ian Dasek is.
Well,
yes?
Ian Dasek, it sounds like Ian Dasek was your lawyer.
No, he's the pro bono lawyer that couldn't... I'm sorry, I don't mean to be upset. I'm saying that he called Elizabeth to explain that the lower courts are not following the law with regard to due process and appointing public defenders. So he first tried to sell her on paying him $1,200 to $1,500 to settle the case. Then when she explained that they already took all of our money and we don't have any more left, and we drove all the way up there expecting to have it dismissed because he said that it would be rightfully dismissed on those grounds. Now he's a lawyer that said.
When you say took all your money, what do you mean?
He was according to the lawyer's rules of professional conduct in your state. Advertisements, which the word.
That's not what I asked you. That's not what I asked.
Wait a minute now. Advertisements are disclose or warning. He advertised, therefore disclosed and warned us that we were not going to be able to have a public attorney, and then said that he could probably solve it for $1,200 to $1,500, knowing that they routinely do this. He even said that they routinely do this, and so does the official report from the state auditor. I think it's in my documents that I sent you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said they took all your money, and I was trying to figure out who.
Yeah, 615 and 615.
You paid your ticket.
You want me to send you the ticket numbers?
No, you paid your. So what you're saying is you paid all this.
We paid it so that we could go to court without risking arrest. We were under duress, under threat of certain arrest, if we did not pay. So we paid, showed up in court. We were not sworn in. I caught in open court while they were speaking to microphones that they claim we can have the recordings and transcripts from. We caught them lying, being evasive, suppressing evidence, and threatening.
Okay. All right. Well, let me look into this and see who else I need to send paperwork to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry to trouble you.
You're very welcome. Not a problem, sir.
Okay, bye. Again, this is from Michelle and Linda and Aaron and somebody else who I forget. This is Jose Melendez. I am still waiting for a response from Solicitor Duffy's office about these issues. Thank you.
Michelle Fraser at the Solicitor's office. You can reach me. Mr. Melendez, it's Michelle Fraser at the Solicitor's office. You can reach me at 843-790-6220. We trying to get in touch with you for our 10 a.m. conference call. Thank you. Solicitor's office, this is Michelle.
Michelle, I'm sorry. I'm in meetings. I'm having to sell my house over this. You'll have to write me something telling me what you want to have this conference call about. I have to go. I have lawyers.
Solicitor's office. At any time, you can press 0 for an operator. Press.
You have reached the Beaufort County Victims Advocate Office, the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office. At any time, you can press 0 for the operator. Please listen to the following list to reach the correct person. Press 1 for Michelle Fraser. Press 2 for April Winston. Press 3 for Kathy Zahn.
Transferring your call to Michelle Fraser.
Solicitor's office is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. I'm sorry if I was rude. I have people that are waiting on me. Can you please have them write down what they want to talk about, because this is very taxing. No, we're not. No, we're not doing this. I'm busy now, and you need to write it down, Duffy.
Calling up and asking to speak with a solicitor. I'm the deputy solicitor, and it's my job to call people who've asked.
Oh, yes, but I need a lawyer in on this conversation because you can prosecute me.
If you are represented by counsel, I can't talk to you anyway. Just give me the name of your attorney and his phone number, and I'll be happy to call him for you.
Right now, I'm forced to conduct this criminal case pro se.
Okay, well, then I can talk to you.
Well, no. Again, you need to please. I'm requesting that you put these questions in writing.
I don't have any questions for you. I'm returning your phone call at your request, sir.
Have you listened to what I told Michelle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you read on chemosynthetic.com my progress documentation?
No, sir. I've read your email to our office asking to speak with the solicitor.
Okay, fine. I will send you the link so that you can read the documentation that I have. You will then be apprised of the status. This is very important, sir. You have a $400 fine that you've charged us $1,400 for, made us come back. It's very, very difficult. The car broke down on the way back, sir. I had to pay $83 for a $300 alternator and then fix it myself instead of paying the $500 it cost. My girlfriend's about to lose her job, and I'm about to lose my contract with Skydive University.
Mr. Melendez, I didn't charge you, nor did our office charge you anything. We don't deal with the U.S.C. Municipal Court. Our office is a solicitor's office. We handle general sections cases. We don't handle town of U.S.C. Municipal Court. He didn't charge you anything. It's a separate legal entity.
Please.
It's a town court.
Please find some way to respond to this in writing. I will gladly go back to Chief Alexander, who threatened me, but it seems to me that there's got to be some other way. Sir.
Mr. Melendez, I'm simply trying to return your phone call that you requested.
Are you telling me that there's no way that you can help me find some way to resolve this, or at least find some avenue for a fair trial?
Mr. Melendez, what I can tell you is the solicitor's office is not the town of U.S.C. We don't handle tickets.
The town of U.S.C. is not responding to. They're not giving me any Rule 5 evidence and the stuff that they've given me. Excuse me. They gave us one piece when we forced their hand because the guy showed up. Now I don't know what lawyers I can hire for $5,000 each, but I'm having to sell my house to pay $50,000 to a big time law firm to take care of this in civil court. I don't know how else to handle this. I'm asking you, as an attorney, to look at your rights and responsibilities under the law to expose extrinsic fraud, sir.
Okay, I know what my rights and responsibilities are. And
So you agree that this does fall under the definition of extrinsic fraud, or no? Are you telling me that from what you've seen so far and from what you will see on chemosynthetic.com or swipswaps.com that you are not going to see any evidence of extrinsic fraud?
It would be against my ethical duties to give you legal advice.
I'm not asking for legal advice, sir. I'm saying from your position, if I show you, as I have shown you, is it not in your rules of conduct to expose extrinsic fraud as I have reported to you and the sheriff and the FBI, sir?
I don't have the same responsibilities as either the sheriff or the FBI, sir. Again, I'm not the town of U.S.C.
Well, it seems to me we're going in circles here. Is there anything else that you'd like to speak about? Michelle, are you listening to this?
She's right here in the room with me, sir. Miss Frazier works for me.
Yes, so Miss Frazier knows that we are the victims here.
No, sir, and I wanted to clear that up too. Apparently,
No, we're done.
You have reached the voicemail box of George Kennedy at the office of the state auditor. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.
Record your message after the tone. When you've finished, you can hang up or press 1 for more options.
Mr. Kennedy, my name is Jose Melendez. I had sent you an email with a letter with regard to U.S.C, the audit you did in 2017 of U.S.C. I just have one quick question, and I'll get out of your hair. Please call me back at 202-642-6571. It is rather important. Thank you.
To review it, press 2. To re-record your message, here's what you've recorded.
Mr. Kennedy, my name is Jose Melendez. I had sent you an email with a letter with regard to U.S.C, the audit you did in 2017 of U.S.C. I just have one quick question, and I'll get out of your hair. Please call me back at 202-642-6571. It is rather important. Thank you.
If you are satisfied with your recording, press 1. To review it, to send your message now, press 1. To mark it as important, press 2. To mark message marked important. To send your message now, press 1. To remove message sent. To disconnect, press 1. To enter another, please call again. Thank you. Goodbye. To review it, to send your message now, press 1. To mark it as important, press 2. To mark message marked important. To send your message now, press 1. To remove message sent. To disconnect, press 1. To enter another, please call again. Thank you. Goodbye.